correspondent John.
With John Chancellor in New York and Chief...
This is the 52-acre site on which the city of Wetumpka wants to locate its new garbage landfill. But if the residents of Cherokee Estates win their lawsuit, the city will have to look elsewhere. The dump site is close, very close to the homes of the residents. The closest is only 75 feet away. Attorney John Insland represents the residents.
None of the residents had any prior notice at all that the city was considering a dump in this site.
We contacted Wetumpka Mayor Truman Welch. However, Mayor Welch would not comment on the advice of his attorney. City Councilman Bob Whaley did speak with us, though, concerning the landfill. He says he understands how the residents feel and says he has been working on their behalf.
I have supported their cause on the basis of trying to find an alternative to this problem, to find another site, if at all possible. If not, then to make sure that what's done there will be done properly, be supervised, be properly cleaned up on a daily basis.
Attorney Insland says the next legal step is up to the city to file an answer to their complaint. That's expected to come in January. From Elmore County, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Ali called his comeback attempt the drama in the Bahama, but it quickly became the trauma in the Bahama, thanks to promoters whose financial problems threatened to cancel the entire fight card. They also couldn't find the key to the sports center's gate, which kept the crowd waiting for more than an hour. And they forgot to get a bell. A cowbell was pressed into service. Water buckets were bought at a nearby store just before fight time, and some of the gloves were left in Miami. Ali was forced to dress in the ladies' room because the facilities provided for him by promoters were too small. But all this was forgotten when the three-time heavyweight champion made his appearance. The 39-year-old Ali had been urged not to fight by friends and doctors for fear he'd be seriously injured. His opponent last night was 27-year-old Trevor Berbick, the British Commonwealth champion. He had few problems with Ali for most of the fight, and Ali clearly looked afraid several times. He came to life for a couple of rounds as the fans chanted, "Ali, Ali." But his staggering punches were few and frequently missed the mark. In the 7th round, Berbick pounded Ali into the ropes and hit him with blow after blow. After one barrage, Ali broke free and showed that outraged look that once meant he was about to attack. Not this time. Berbick won a unanimous decision. Just after midnight in his dressing room, Muhammad Ali realized he's too old to fight. What do you think about it all tonight?
Father time caught.
Father time caught you? His proud family seemed relieved.
I don't want him to fight anymore.
You don't want him to fight anymore? Why?
Because he might get hurt. He's getting too old.
He proved himself he's a real champ. He fought a younger man, toe-to-toe.
And this morning, Ali said he knew he could last 10 rounds in his last fight.
I've been doing it since I was 12. And it's a joy and relief to know it's over.
But this is the way millions will remember Muhammad Ali, the man who proved the experts wrong and who will always be called the champ.
Dexter Avenue Baptist Church is the second oldest Black Baptist church in Montgomery and is probably the most famous of all of the city's churches. This morning its membership gathered to sing, worship, and give praise for the church and its historic existence that has lasted for 104 years. The church is most well known as being that of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who preached here for 6 years during the turbulent civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. The guest speaker for the anniversary service was Dr. Benjamin Payton, president of Tuskegee Institute. Dr. Payton paid tribute to Dr. King for his nonviolent leadership during the civil rights movement. Dr. Payton also praised famous black educator Booker T. Washington for his great contributions to black education. Payton said a lot of changes have taken place since the civil rights years and says blacks have come a long way, but still have not yet reached the promised land of which Dr. King spoke of. Members of the congregation, both black and white, listened intently as Dr. Payton spoke. All seemed to appreciate the message and the importance behind it on this historic occasion. From Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
It's going to cause some services to be diminished. I think it's going to phase it back just a little bit. What services will be phased back, I just don't know. But currently, the amount of monies that we have now is enough to handle the entire program in its present context. In the event that the money comes down in a block grant, that means some administrative funds are going different places here and there. And it's going to take away from the program, I think. And the program's going to be hurt.
How much will it hurt the program?
Well, it depends on how deep the state gets into it if they decide to accept the block grant. I just don't know what the governor's thoughts are, whether or not he intends to administer it from his office or whether or not
Montgomery County Head Start Director Willie Paul says the new White House proposal could mean closing down one or more of the 18 Head Start centers in the county, and that means serving less children.
But currently, the amount of monies that we have now is enough to handle the entire program in its present context. In the event that the money comes down in a block grant, that means some administrative funds are going different places here and there. And it's going to take away from the program, I think. And the program
currently, the 16-year-old Montgomery County Head Start program is the largest in the state, serving over 1,100 children. Paul says it's those children he's most concerned about. Last Wednesday, Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer told a group of Head Start parents that he supports the budget plans of President Reagan, and he also supports programs like Head Start, calling it the finest program he's seen. Paul says Head Start has a proven record of success and shouldn't suffer from budget cuts.
I think it's belt-tightening time for everybody. Head Start can tighten his belt as well as anybody else. But I don't think that the program should be diminished because of the way that some people want to run it.
The chairman of the board of directors of the Montgomery Community Action Committee, Brad Gessner, says up until now, federal funds to Head Start were administered by the Community Action Agency. Now how those funds are handled will be up to the state. Paul says he's not surprised the Budget Act's finally reached Head Start. He says Head Start carries a big dollar sign, and he never really believed that safety net business anyway. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
God has blessed us with another year of... I want to first say right quick when I have to leave early. I belong to the church out at Fraser Memorial. We'll have the Katana.
The game marked the return of former Alabama coach C.M. Newton to Memorial Coliseum, where he led the Crimson Tide to 12 of their best basketball seasons. But for Newton, now coach of the Commodores, it wasn't a happy homecoming. Vandy did jump out to an early lead as the Coal-shooting Tide fell behind 26-19 midway through the first half. But that's when Watley, Hurt, and the rest of the Tide took over. Crashing the offensive boards, Bama reeled off 11 unanswered points and never trailed again. Watley, nicknamed Enamo, hitting for 2 of his game-high 20 points here, was a master in ball control. He continually amazed the near sellout crowd with dazzling passes and tricky ball handling. Hurt, coming off the bench, raised the crowd to their feet several times with earth-shattering slam dunks. He scored 19, pulled down 9 rebounds, and also blocked 3 shots. Veteran guard Mike Davis was a stabilizing force for the Crimson Tide. He chipped in 13 points. Willie Hutch-Jones led Vandy with 16. With the win, the 16th-ranked Crimson Tide ran their record to 5-0, 1-0 in the SEC. Vandy fell to 2-2, 0-1 in the conference. Alabama's in action again Saturday night in Birmingham against Penn State.
I have under no conditions found anything illegal or unethical in any way. If I had, I would immediately put a stop to it. And then some of the complaints that were given to you, these owners have never contacted our office. If they had, we would immediately take care of it, just like we've done on all other houses. We have been very prompt about taking care of any complaints. And they complain to you, but they have never called our office and made any complaints whatsoever.
Did any contractor or anybody having worked with the HUD program ever ask you to do anything illegal or unethical?
No way. There's not any signs of it whatsoever.
Do you have any idea why these people would tell me one thing and tell you something else?
That's what I'd like to know. That's the reason I'm here. I'd like to, you've been told one thing and I've been told another. You've been told something that I know absolutely nothing about, and I don't understand it at all, and I know it's not right.
The voting booths in the Macon County Courthouse are sealed and waiting. Inside, the ballots read for and against. At issue is a proposed 1% county occupational tax. Macon County Commission Clerk and Treasurer George Bull says the commission is anticipating cuts of about $300,000 next year in federal revenue sharing funds. This, along with the economy, prompted the commission to ask for the new tax. Bull says the tax is necessary to avoid shutting down what he calls vital county services. Among them, rural nutrition programs for senior citizens, juvenile programs, and emergency ambulance service.
This is a tax on gross wage income. In other words, if a person works for a salary of $10,000 a year, he would owe $100 a year occupation tax.
The opposition to the proposed tax is led by women involved in farm economics. Chairwoman Mary Ann Shepard says the tax is not necessary, that the county has the money already if the commission will only look for it. Mrs. Shepard says because the tax is on gross income, people suffering net losses would still have to pay the tax. Bowles denies that, saying business operations like farming would be taxed on net profit instead of gross income. Mrs. Shepard also says because the tax would be levied against anyone who works in the county, whether or not they live there, people who live outside the county and can't vote on the tax might be victims of taxation without representation. Bowles has no argument. He says those people use county roads and services and should pay for them. Bowles says if approved, the tax could provide $500,000 a year, but all of those plans ride on how the vote goes tomorrow morning. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
We pay tribute today because December 14th, 1819, and Ty Cobb, a musician such as Jackson Kelly and Hank Lee, and in our own age, there are many.
Aim. Fire. Ready. Whoop. About.
Attorney General Charles Graddick says he'll once again fight such a move by Judge Varner. The AG staff is compiling backgrounds on each inmate in the master list now, detailing the crimes committed. Graddick says if he has to appeal a release order, he'll use this information to back his position. Graddick's staff has already prepared legal papers to use in court when and if the time comes. Graddick was defeated in his last attempt to have a release order stayed, but this time he's representing Prison Commissioner Joe Hopper and working alongside the governor to prevent a release. So if an order comes, Graddick says the chances of winning an appeal are greater. But John Carroll, an attorney for inmates in ongoing prison suits, says Judge Varner has no choice but to release a large number of inmates and that Graddick, Hopper, and the governor are wrong in trying to prevent a release.
I think their motivation is entirely political.
Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Cameras were barred from the meeting as law enforcement officials asked the committee not to rubber stamp the rule as drafted by the Alabama Supreme Court. At issue is a part of the rule that would require prosecutors to turn over the names, addresses, and testimony by witnesses to be used against defendants. Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans says such a rule could lead to intimidation, maiming, and death of witnesses, especially in organized crime cases.
We have some cases under investigation in grand jury right now for witness intimidation. It's a difficult thing to prove because you don't have to, some of these criminals are very sophisticated. They don't get out with a gun and point it at their head, but they make it known to them what's going to happen to them if they testify. And now it's just an invitation to turn over the names and addresses of your witnesses and what they're going to say about a criminal on the stand.
After objections from defense attorneys, the committee voted to throw out the witness disclosure portion of the rule and approve several amendments wanted by law enforcement officials. The amendments will now go on to the Supreme Court, and the High Court has the discretion to either accept or deny those amendments. And conceivably, they could take the draft that has created all the controversy, and make it part of the rules. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Judge Varner's order says although the federal courts don't sit to supervise state prisons or to intervene with the administration of state institutions, the courts must intervene and act to prevent violations of prisoners' rights. So in essence what the order says, unless someone can show cause as to why an inmate should not be released, all 352 will go free December 22nd. But the difference between this release and the last is that these inmates will be subject to probation regulations and they'll have to pay restitution ordered during their trials. The prisoners released last July were let out with no strings attached. Governor Fob James has said he opposes another release, and his press secretary Wendy Level says he expects the governor to go to court to block the order. Attorney General Charles Graddick's staff is gathering background information on the crimes the inmates slated for release committed. Graddick says he plans to use that information to fight the release, just like he did last summer. But this time, Graddick is representing Prison Commissioner Joe Hopper and is working alongside rather than against Governor James to prevent another release. And Graddick says his chances for winning an appeal are much better. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Charles Humphreys of Pearson Humphreys Jones & Associates says the new jail will cost $11.3 million. He says most of the 254 inmates will have single cells, with the remainder living in a dormitory-type setting. Humphreys says the proposed jail would be located on the corner of McDonough and Scott Street. The design also calls for moving several courts to Lawrence Street. Humphreys asked the commission to approve the schematic design so that the architects can start on the preliminary design. The commissioners took no action on the issue. But local resident John Cohen says he opposes the new jail. He says the commissioners should add on to the existing jail, which he says would only cost $7.5 million, in contrast to the $11 million for the new facility. Cohen says the new jail would require more guards and would probably necessitate a bond issue. Montgomery County Sheriff Max Tim Butler agreed that the renovation of the old jail would cost less. He says the renovation would only require 47 guards, where the new jail would require 74. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Bill Edwards, director of the Alabama Coalition Against Hunger, says under federal regulations, the money can be spent on a number of things, including highway and bridge maintenance and repair, public transportation and airport usage fees, and weatherization. He says of all of the choices, weatherization would be the greatest benefit to the people of Alabama in an effort to help reduce heating and cooling bills. The coalition's plan calls for the purchase of weatherization kits, which would be distributed by churches and nonprofit organizations.
We're recommending that 90% of this $1 million be spent to provide home weatherization kits to low and moderate income Alabama households. Now, taking 90% of the funds would result in $946,000 that the state of Alabama could spend to provide some 26,279 Alabama households with a complete weatherization kit.
The kit contains everything from weather stripping to water heater blankets and would cost about $36 wholesale. Edwards says the energy savings in the first year alone would be about $7.9 million. The coalition will present its idea to the State Department of Energy Thursday. Meanwhile, Energy Director Ed Hudspeth says his department is willing to listen to the proposal, but that doesn't mean the department will adhere to the plan. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Bulk comes through Florida, but there is a problem here. That's exactly right, because you're within the range. So we're sitting down and reviewing our mutual problems and working out cooperative efforts on the premise that this is a problem for all of us, including the federal government, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with new strategies that will help local law enforcement meet the problem of violent crime.
Hogg says the city first contracted for the new code to be drawn up back in 1964, and the Virginia company handling the new code has been busy preparing it ever since. Hogg says one reason it took so long was the complexity of the job. The company first had to take the existing city code and then rewrite it to include all amending ordinances. The code now includes all ordinances adopted through October 1980. Councilman Joe Reed offered the only discussion on the new code. He asked that the ordinance setting the price of the code, $75 a copy, be amended to allow any councilman requesting a copy to get one free. In other action, the council reappointed the city's 3 municipal judges and established a new office, City Jail Chaplain. The council carried over only one item of business, an application for a lounge liquor license by Willie Long Jr. for the Apollo 2 on Caffey Drive. The delay was requested by Councilman Reed since Councilman Donald Watkins, in whose district Apollo 2 is located, was not at today's meeting. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Secretary of State Don Siegelman was in the process of outlining his $664,000 budget request for next year when he was asked why he was looking into Representative Lee Pegues' legislative salary. Siegelman said it was in preparation for a possible political battle with Pegues, a battle that started earlier this year when Siegelman contested a Perry County voter re-identification bill sponsored by Pegues. Siegelman accused Pegues of trying to wipe out the black voter population in Perry County, but Pegues was not at the meeting to defend himself against the accusations. Later, when State Treasurer Annie Laurie Gunner was defending her request for a separate computer system for the Treasurer's office, she and Committee Chairman Senator Ted Little tried to drown each other out with accusations and defenses about the investment policies of the Treasurer's office. Committee co-chairman Representative Walter Owens refereed the brief verbal battle and stopped it when he said it was becoming personal. Ms. Gunner is asking for $1.4 million, $400,000 more than she's operating with this year. In addition, she said she would be back during the regular session asking for a $52,000 supplement to her current budget. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
For the past several years, district attorneys have been trying to get a bill on jury selection through the state legislature. The bill would have allowed prosecutors and defense lawyers to strike or dismiss an equal amount of potential jurors from serving on a jury. The current process allows defense lawyers twice as many strikes as prosecutors. Rule 15, or the discovery rule, was part of a package deal to get one-for-one strikes approved statewide by the judicial system rather than by the state legislature. The package deal fell apart when law enforcement officers said the discovery rule drafted by the Supreme Court was too liberal and could lead to witnesses being harmed by defendants who knew where they lived and what they would say in court. In view of the objections, a high court did not adopt either the discovery rule or the rule for one-for-one strikes. Chief Justice C.C. Bo Torbett says one-for-one strikes is very important for the state, and he'll try to get state lawmakers to pass a bill on the issue in the next regular session. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
to help relieve the overcrowded condition of the Alabama prison system is the release of a substantial number of those inmates, and listen, who appear to be most likely to assume positions of responsibility and trust outside the prison system. That nauseates me and everybody in this office that works on it.
Granick pointed out several rap sheets on inmates who were scheduled for release. He says one man has as many as 15 prior convictions, and he adds Judge Varner wants to let these people go right before Christmas. In his order, the judge says since the state is still not in compliance with standards established by the court, he has no choice but to let the inmates out. But Granick says he's determined to fight the release, and now with Governor Fob James at his side, he says his chances of winning an appeal are much greater. Granick says he's afraid this Christmas will take on a different type of atmosphere if the prisoners are freed. He says Santa Claus will be wearing stripes and taking gifts rather than bringing them. Granick says if there's one question Judge Varner should be asked, it's who gave him the authority to do what he's doing. Granick says by the stroke of his pen, Varner became the state's chief parole officer, and he says he's usurping the power of the Pardons and Paroles Board. Granick says one man on the list, number 139, James Lewis Hardy, was convicted just last March on capital murder charges. He was sentenced to life without parole, yet he's on the list and will be released just a couple of days before Christmas with the rest of them. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News at the Administration Building.
$6 million in energy costs. This situation is one of a giant oil company which was caught ripping off the citizens of Alabama and other citizens in this country, and they finally got caught through this audit. Now our plan is to see that this $1 million is used to benefit the ordinary men and women of this state, those people who have been most hurt by the incredible increase in energy costs over the years. So what we've tried to do is to develop a simple plan that will work, because we feel that government works best when it is simple, when an application...
Boys and Girls Ranch, and I might add that the 8th Taste of Montgomery will be November the 11th at the Civic Center. Right at 100.
Join with us in our fight against this federal judge without a dime in his pocket. Simple robbery, I'm not sure what that is. Worthy and have a good conduct record, then I say the individual who... They're a bunch of thugs. They're a bunch of thieving, robbing, sodomizing, rapist, murdering people on a list of 352 people that he says he believes will assume a position of responsibility and trust outside the penitentiary system. About the only one on here that I can see, about the only person that I can see, out of the ones that I've looked at and we've had an opportunity. People this year, I'm afraid that it's either going to be on Christmas Day or before or after. We're not talking criminal in our state prison system today. We're filing a motion for a stay in Judge Varner's court. We are also appealing what he has done. We're also filing specific and general objections to the class of prisoners and each individual prisoner. And I want to say this.
As far as the parolees, I understand the Attorney General will lodge a protest, and if that's upheld, it will have no effect. However, if it's overruled and they are given to us on parole, for Montgomery County, I can envision only very few more assigned to each parole officer, probably between 6 and 10 each, and with the caseloads that we have now, it would make very little difference.
I-J and K. 31-4. 138 again.
It was a very light voter turnout. Only 27% of Macon County's 14,000 registered voters went to the polls, yet each precinct soundly voted against the tax. Members of the Macon County Commission say the 1% occupational tax would offset expected federal funding cutbacks and subsequent cuts in some county programs. But an organization called Women Involved in Farm Economics opposed the tax. Group spokesman Mrs. Marianne Shepard says the tax isn't necessary. Mrs. Shepard says she's very happy it's been defeated.
I feel that this organization, WIFE, that I belong to, this Women Involved in Farm Economics, have fought a good battle. I'm proud of WIFE, and we work to help our husbands and our farmers. And this bill will pertain to my husband and farmers in this county. And I'm very happy.
Macon County probate judge Preston Hornsby.
We will miss that revenue, I'm sure, but it's going to hurt. But that's just something you can't look forward to till you get it.
Hornsby says he doesn't see any other way the county can come up with more money. Now that the 1% tax has been defeated, he says it looks like the county will just have to operate on the funds it has. Reporting from Tuskegee, Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The Lions pounced on the Vikings on their first possession and never let up. Billy Sims opened the scoring for the Lions with his 14-yard touchdown. But the sign of things to come for the Vikes at the Pontiac Silverdome, where the Lions are undefeated this year, came when Robbie Martin took this Greg Coleman punt 45 yards for a touchdown, 14-0 Detroit. The Vikings did get back into the game in the second period. That when Tommy Kramer put 6 on the board when he found Joe Sensor in the end zone. After that, it was all Detroit. Eric Hipple made it a 24-7 game when he hooked up with Freddie Scott. And just think, 2 months ago, Eric Hipple wasn't even a household name in Detroit. Gary Danielson was the Lions quarterback then. He threw this 27-yard scoring pass to Tracy Porter to close out the scoring, 45-7 Detroit. For the 8-7 Lions, their playoff hopes stay alive. Rich Brenner for NBC News.
A meeting call to air out possibly some of the problems that, as far as addressing quality education.
Would we meet again then in a short time, or what? I'm not.
3 or 4 possible changes.
I would think would want to discuss it with them, of course, and communicate.
They prepared a formal response to the governor. It's been transmitted to him. I don't suppose it's got your hands yet are concerned, and most of them have come out at this particular meeting. So that what we're in.
Because this may not be the plan that we send up there.
They have seen.
They have seen the plan.
Mr. Sanford, we've got some, of course, like everybody else, we just received this a few days ago.
The State Superintendent of Education, the Director of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education, 2 representatives from the Governor's Office, and the presidents of 12 state universities. They all gathered this morning in Montgomery to consider a plan by Governor James to end segregation in state universities. A plan which in revised form represents the state's last chance to respond to a letter of findings from the federal government accusing Alabama of violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The meeting was not encouraging. The university heads for the most part did not like the plan. Some said it demanded too much, too soon. Others said it was too specific, and the December 31st deadline to submit a plan to Washington was too close to allow careful consideration of the plan. But the governor's legal advisor, Jimmy Samford, says the U.S. Department of Education has already indicated the governor's plan may be too broad. He warned the university heads not to expect any changes in the specifics. The presidents now have 1 week to consider the plan with their advisors and decide if they'll endorse it and under what conditions. If any university fails to sign the agreement, Samford says the feds will not accept it and will step in to devise their own plan for the state, perhaps in federal court. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. They met to discuss a plan submitted by Governor Fob James, a plan which, for the most part, was not to their liking. They told the governor's special assistant for education, Howard Gundy, the plan asked too much, too late. They said they didn't have enough time to consider the specifics of the governor's plan and ask if it could be broadened. The governor's legal advisor, Jimmy Samford, told them not to count on that. The U.S. Department of Education has indicated the governor's plan may already be too general. And there was another roadblock. State Superintendent of Education Wayne Teague flatly stated he won't sign the document unless all plans to give additional money to higher education are removed. The whole issue began in January with a letter to the governor from federal authorities accusing Alabama of violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by failing to remove the vestiges of segregation from the state universities. Now, with a response to that letter due by the first of the year, the university leaders and the governor seem as far as ever from reaching an agreement. That could mean the decision will soon no longer be theirs, but will belong to the federal government. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Alabama has a reputation, for example, the work of Auburn University is respected around the country, especially we're aware of some of the work in the community resource development area, and we wanted these young leaders to see how the university is working with local people to solve local problems. And so we've been really immersing ourselves in trying to understand the history of Alabama, understanding some of the work specifically in Randolph County, some of the efforts to improve the quality of life here, and we're doing that by having our young leaders from across the country and the Caribbean become acquainted with leaders and leadership efforts within the state here.
Bronner says it will take an estimated $472 million to fund the teachers' and employees' retirement systems and the Judicial Retirement Fund next fiscal year. But Representative Eric Cate says he thinks the system could operate on a smaller appropriation, questioning what he called the absolute security of financial soundness. Bronner says that philosophy will destroy the system 10 or 15 years down the road. And Bronner says financial experts agree one major factor in the cost of Alabama's retirement system is the high level of benefits. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale formed a series of questions forcing Bronner to admit that the Retirement Systems Board of Control used different rationales for handling recent surplus appropriations. Bronner hesitated to answer when Representative James Sasser pushed the point one step further, asking if those rationales belonged to Board Chairman Paul Hubbard. Later, Securities Commissioner Tom Krebs met Representative Bob Gafford, who's been verbally jabbing at Krebs since his publicity in investigating alleged pay-for-parole scams. Gafford questioned Krebs about the legality of his holding numerous positions with the Security Commission, Governor's Task Force on Crime, and the Leviticus Project. Then Gafford said it appeared Krebs was using his office as a springboard for a campaign for Attorney General. Krebs reacted by showing a bumper sticker that surfaced recently promoting Gafford for governor. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
There's more to choosing a Christmas tree than just looking at the shape and size. One very important factor is the age of the tree. You see, the older the tree is, the drier it is, and the drier the tree is, the more susceptible it is to heat and to fire. One way to tell if the tree is old and dry is by how easily the needles fall off. Take the tree and shake it. If a shower of needles falls to the ground, then the tree is too dry. Other ways to check for freshness, see if the trunk of the tree is sticky with resin, and see if the needles are hard to pull from the branches. And when bent between your fingers, make sure the needles don't break.
We definitely advise keeping the tree well away from the fireplace. Of course, the heat is going to tend to dry it out extremely fast. And there again, the drier it gets, the more of a fire hazard. Keep it away from space heaters, and if at all possible, if you have, say, central heat in your house, then the vent closest to the tree or right around close proximity to the tree, cut this vent off, because like I say here, this warm air blowing down on the tree, here again, will tend to dry it out.
Make sure you place the tree in a sturdy water-holding stand and keep the base holder filled with water. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
These men wouldn't qualify as Santa's elves, but they could be considered Santa's helpers. They're Corporal M.E. Bailey and Investigator J.E. Bates of the Montgomery Police Department Youth Aid Division. For the past couple of months, they've been collecting bicycles, toys, and clothes. The bicycles usually wind up here behind a workshop at the Maxwell Air Force Base Federal Prison Camp. These two men, who are inmates at the camp, can also be considered Santa's helpers. 27-year-old Robert Fowler and 29-year-old Jimmy Fisher, with about 5 other inmates, have been refurbishing the bikes that will be donated to the Youth Aid Division Christmas program. But why would inmates spend their spare time working on bikes for kids they don't know or won't even see?
I just think about the way I felt whenever I got a bicycle, when I was about the age of some of these kids that are going to be getting them. And pretty well satisfied, knowing that they're going to be pretty happy with it.
Well, I can't help my family, so I'd like to help somebody else's family that could use the bicycles for their kids.
This year, inmates hope to turn out about 50 like-new bikes. And with the help of the inmates and other civic organizations and private citizens' donations, the Montgomery Police Department Youth Aid Division hopes to help about 65 families who are down and out on their luck this year to have a Christmas they normally wouldn't have. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Saturday night, about 4 weeks ago, I just kind of hyperventilated and fainted. And then all through the week I had chest pains and back pains.
17-year-old Lori Cruz is lucky to be alive today. Looking at her, you wouldn't know that less than a month ago she underwent open-heart surgery performed by a cardiovascular specialist at St. Margaret's Hospital. The operation was supposed to be routine. The doctors went in to repair a faulty aortic valve, which doctors say was leaking, and would have eventually led to her death. However, after the initial 6-hour operation, there were complications.
Oh, I kept bleeding, hemorrhaging, I guess, and so after the main surgery, they had to open me up 3 more times, and they had to keep going back for blood.
Finally, when it was all over, 190 units of blood had been used to keep Lori alive. Doctors say without it, she wouldn't have survived. Lori says she has a lot to be thankful for.
While I was in intensive care, I was getting cards from Red Cross that said people had donated blood to me. And that really meant a lot, to know that, you know, my friends or people that I didn't even know would donate blood to me.
After 2 weeks in intensive care and a week under general observation, Lori was allowed to come home. She's a senior at Lanier High School and says she's ready to get back to class and get her life back to normal. Her doctors say she should be fully recovered within 6 to 8 weeks. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
My friends or people.
Governor James says he's not only received commitments from 4 to 7 Japanese companies to look at Alabama as a possible industry site next year, but 8 to 10 Korean companies have committed as well. Governor James says both countries knew very little about Alabama, making this trip all the more important.
The bottom line is that we have moved into what I believe to be a competitive position with our other sister southern states primarily.
When asked about his reaction to the prisoner release order, Governor James said he needed time to learn the details of the matter, but says he does intend to resist the move.
And as to our legal recourse, I can't give you the specifics of that, but it will be designed to win, to do nothing else but win.
Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.